I used to believe that setting boundaries is an effective way to deal with narcissists, but due to being involved in an accident and basically being in bed for 6 months, I had a lot of time to think. At first, setting boundaries seems logical, and many articles and therapists agree. But as I was lying in bed with a full leg cast on and feeling sorry for myself while gaining weight, I started to reflect on my life and started to look at my interactions with highly narcissistic people over several years and decades. I also reflected on many stories victims of abuse told me years back while waiting outside court for our cases to be heard. I was a witness in a horrific abuse case that dragged on for almost 6 years. So let me share some of the things that happened to me and others and how I came to change my belief on the effectiveness on setting boundaries with abusers and highly narcissistic people. I promise that even if it does not change your mind about boundaries, it will make you look at its effectiveness in dealing with these people in a new light. The first piece to the puzzle came from a story an old work friend told me. We used to work together as software programmers before I left South Africa to explore the world for almost 9 years. When I returned, I hooked up with a mutual friend of ours who invited me to her birthday. All 3 of us were there and we spent most of the day catching up. The birthday friend eventually went home and me and my friend talked until late that evening. I was already involved with a court case and had shared some of the details with her. Having noted that she was alone at the party, I eventually asked her where her husband was, to which she replied that she left him and was actually hiding from him. Shocked, I asked why. She replied that he abused her, and one night she finally scraped enough courage together to tell him that she would no longer take his abuse. His response was to deck her with a punch to the face and then proceeded to punch and kick her as she lay in the hallway. Having beaten her unconscious, he went to watch television. When she woke up later with pain filling her body, he ignored her and continued watching television. With considerable effort, she took herself to the hospital, where she found out that he had knocked out some of her front teeth and had broken several of her ribs, just because she said she was unhappy with how he treated her. That was the first crack in my belief that setting boundaries work on highly narcissistic people or abusers. Have you ever thought about what boundary setting actually is? It is telling another person how they should behave. If the other person has respect for you or wants to keep you happy, they will comply with your demands. But what do you do when the other person has zero respect or empathy for you? What do you do when they care nothing about your demands or requests to change their behavior? Right, I thought. You have to make them care by having consequences for them not behaving as you want them to behave. But that would require you having power or leverage over the person so that they are afraid of the consequences. Then another crack in my belief formed. Many victims of abuse are smaller or less powerful than the abuser, or they rely financially on their abuser. They have no means to go against the person. Okay, I thought, what if you get outside help, like the authorities? And that brings us to the next story. I had made friends with a cashier in a small store I frequented. Over time, she had learned about my situation as I often went by the shop after a court appearance. So she wondered why I sometimes come in dressed so differently. One day after a court appearance that she knew the date in advance, she had a friend come in and wait for me. The lady was being abused by her husband and was deadly afraid of him and needed advice. Even though they had split up and she lived in her own place now, he would not leave her alone. I suggested that she gets a protection order, as I had helped a family member get one against her husband. I believe that having a court order enforce your boundaries of not wanting any contact would work. Sadly, 2 weeks later, I learned that she was in a serious condition in hospital. She went to the police, but she had no evidence of abuse, so was denied a protection order. But the husband was contacted and given a warning. His response was to immediately go to her house and teach her a lesson for telling lies about him. I felt gutted, but I still thought that setting boundaries and having the power to enforce consequences do work. And the reason it did not work for her was because she did not have the evidence needed to get someone to enforce her boundaries or demands for her. So you just need the correct evidence, as I did in helping my family member. I had placed a hidden spy camera in the house and made a short 17-minute video that was so effective. The judge I showed it to immediately wrote both an eviction and protection order against the father, something she said she had never done in her almost 40-year career. So she gave me her personal cell number in case the police were reluctant to comply with such an unusual order, which they did initially until I called her and had them listen to what she was going to do to them for not following her order. She had also immediately ordered a criminal case to be opened, and a few days later I met with a brigadier who was one of the police psychologists who would be interviewing the children. Now imagine my surprise when the father a few days later showed up at the house with 2 police officers demanding entry into the house. I don't know what lies he told the police, but they demanded I open the house up so he can get some of his belongings. I refused and produced the protection and eviction order, and that's when he started spinning all kinds of accusations and lies, to the point that the police tried to order me to open the house up and then tried to arrest me for refusing. Seeing things were going south very quickly, I called the judge and the brigadier for help. The judge ripped the police a new one, as the father had just moments before admitted to the police officers that he had received the court orders and signed them, so they should actually arrest him for ignoring the orders. In the meantime, the brigadier got onto the phone and grabbed out the local station commander, who immediately contacted the 2 police officers on scene and ordered them to remove the father from the area. Thinking back on this incident, it hit me, and another crack in my belief about boundaries formed. I had court orders barring this person from getting near the house, a judge and a brigadier on my side, and I was almost arrested instead of him. That's how good a manipulator these people are. I was also not backing down and held my ground against the 2 police officers on scene. But how many victims would do that? And how many victims would have a personal cell numbers of a judge and a brigadier? Very few, I realized. A week later, when he was arrested after the children gave their first statements, the police searched the house while going on with children's statements and found a sword, gun, and ropes that he used to force them to do things children should not do, as well as some videos he made them watch that children should not watch. He wanted access to the house to remove the evidence. I thought that his case was rare, as he was only risking being arrested by ignoring the protection orders because he was desperate, knowing the charges coming his way. But when I researched and watched some documentaries, especially one that Stacey Dooley from BBC did, I was shocked to learn that ignoring protection orders was common. Responding with anger and trying to contact the victim and threaten or even attack the victim to get them to take the protection order back is not uncommon. I'm really glad I stood my ground and the evidence was found. Later I will tell you what eventually happened to the father, but for now, at this point in my journey I thought, okay, sometimes people don't have the power or leverage to enforce consequences for a person violating their boundaries, and sometimes even when you get outside help, the abuser or narcissist does not care about the consequences. But what if you do have power over the narcissist? What if you are stronger, or you are the breadwinner and they need you? It was then that I remembered the weeks after I arrived from overseas and went to stay with these family members. I had taken him on a number of times about the way he spoke to his children, and because I was in way better shape then, as well as that he knew I did martial arts for a long time, he never said a word back to me, but I could see the hatred in his eyes. That's when my stuff started disappearing or just unexplainably being broken or damaged. He blamed the dogs and the children, but I knew it was him. I just could not prove it, which made me feel powerless. He would also disagree to anything I said, or roll his eyes or wave me off. I also remembered what happened to my martial arts instructor. He took a baseball bat to the throat while teaching children at school, and while they waited for the ambulance, he got a stroke. which left him barely being able to use the left side of his body. This caused him to lose his high-paying architect job. His wife is a covert narcissist who loves to spend money. She was also a successful architect. When he asked her to stop blowing money as they couldn't afford it anymore, she got so angry with him, daring to tell her what to do with her money, but she quit her job. They eventually lost the house that was paid for, 3 cars, and had to sell everything they had to survive. Yet, she refused to get a job out of spite and made his life a living hell while blaming him that she was no longer living the high life. And that's where the final crack in my belief in setting boundaries with abusers and narcissists formed. For if you think about it, what is setting boundaries actually? It is you taking control of another person's actions and making them behave the way you want them to, due to them having fear for what you will do to them if they do not do as you wish. But that is exactly how narcissists manipulate and control people. When you tell a narcissist how to behave or try to hold them accountable for their actions, they set a boundary with you and say that they will not accept your behavior toward them. Then they do something to punish you, and they keep going and escalating their behavior, knowing that you will eventually stop. For in most cases, you have more to lose than them, and they are willing to escalate things far more than you. Narcissists have been playing the setting boundaries game from a child. They are way more skilled in it than you can ever be. And while your aim is to just get them to treat you nicely, their aim is to protect their fragile ego and suppress their shame. They have to feel superior to you, often at all cost. So they cannot let you get control over them. Even if they have to go behind your back and smear your name and reputation, they will in some way undermine your control and get you back for setting boundaries with them. They will create arguments with you over benign things, cause drama in public or family gatherings that will embarrass you so much you will never want to go out anymore. They will damage, sell, or give away your stuff, harm you or your pets. They will sabotage your career or studies, make false allegations against you, get you arrested, and on and on. There is no limit to what they can do to you. You set a boundary here, and then they come up with a new way to hurt or annoy you. It's like playing catch up with them, and much of the emotional and psychological damage they do to you, you don't even see, as well as the damage to your name and reputation. And sometimes you cannot recover if they ruined your success or life or injured you. Trying to control a narcissist with fear of consequences is an ineffective long-term strategy. The sheer amount of little things such as eye-rolling, backhanded compliments, insults, negative mood, silent treatments, gaslighting, and more they do on a daily basis are just too much for you to try and stop, even if you have power over them. They will eventually wear you down and destroy your happiness, confidence, drive to succeed, and self-worth until you are just an empty husk of a person you were before you met them. Narcissists by their very nature hurt others, and setting boundaries with them may minimize it to some extent, but it will not stop you from getting hurt. It may actually give you the false belief that you are dealing effectively with a narcissist as you block their major actions, while their tiny cuts go unnoticed, which may cause you to stay in a toxic relationship where the method may change, but the end result is the same: the death of a wonderful person you once were, either by massive blows or death by 1,000 cuts. Getting back to the story of my court case, after almost 6 years and many setbacks and lots of money, he was eventually found guilty and sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 15 years. So looking at that, and my friend who ran away from her husband, and many other victims I spoke to, often the only long-term effective way to stop narcissists and abusers from hurting you is to leave them or have them arrested. Neither option is easy or painless, but it is in the long run less painless than suffering for years or decades their abuse while they slowly destroy you. In 5 years from now, you can still be with a narcissist, or you can start planning now and be free in 5 years. Either way, you'll be 5 years older. To learn more about narcissism, see the video suggested to you right now.